I love working with smart, ambitious, and successful people. They're some of my favorite clients because they're driven and committed to their growth. They want it all. They want the success, the love, the peace, the happiness, the freedom. But when their relationship starts to fall apart, something interesting happens. A lot of these same highly capable people suddenly feel lost, powerless, and emotionally overwhelmed. The confidence that they had everywhere else in life starts to disappear because the strategies that made them successful at work don't translate at home. And honestly, smart people are often the hardest people to help. And not because they aren't capable, and not because they don't care. It's because their intelligence actually becomes their weakness. Let me explain. Highly intelligent people often assume that they already know the answers, that there's nothing new to learn, or that they should be able to figure all of this out on their own. So instead of slowing down, being curious, they just want to debate. But the missing puzzle piece continues to elude them because emotionally charged situations can't always be solved through logic alone. And you cannot learn something new while defending everything you already think you know. Because relationships don't care about how smart you are, and people don't care what you know until they know that you care. You can't create closeness, trust, and connection while trying to win an argument. And a lot of smart people unknowingly turn difficult conversations into a courtroom where they're trying to prove why they're technically right instead of trying to understand the person across from them. They interrupt, they word correct, they cross examine details, and they often dismiss emotions as irrational. They explain their intent instead of listening to the impact. They become cold, detached, and they're so focused on proving that they're right and winning the argument instead of protecting the trust and the connection. And here's the irony. You might be thinking you're winning an argument, but you're losing the relationship. Because what relationships require is something entirely different. What it requires is understanding, vulnerability, humility, and the ability to listen without judging, and to be able to sit in discomfort without trying to control the outcome. And for many successful, high achieving people, especially men, this can feel incredibly uncomfortable because they were never taught these skills growing up. Many men were taught to be tough, to be strong, self reliant, to suppress their emotions, push through the pain and the fear, and figure things out on their own. So when relationship problems show up, they often try to solve these problems with control, defensiveness, and strategy instead of presence, honesty, and understanding. When I'm starting with a new client, one of the things that I hear all the time is, Janelle, I've done a lot of work with my therapist already. I really know myself. I've read the books, listened to the podcast. There's very little that I don't know, and very little surprises me anymore. And then, somewhere in that first conversation, that missing puzzle piece that they've been missing clicks into place, and their eyes get big and their jaw drops. And I see them sit back in their chair, signaling that they just realized something that they've never seen before. Because for the first time, they're not just thinking about the problem, they're finally seeing the patterns. in motion while it's actually happening. You can almost see the moment when the realization hits them. They often say things like, wow, how did I never see that before? Or, wow, that explains so much. Or, wow, maybe I don't know everything. Because there's a huge difference between understanding something and actually experiencing it in real time. And that requires a level of openness, humility, and vulnerability. And that's the part that most people miss. I had a client named Dan who came to me because he was trying to rebuild his relationship after his girlfriend caught him in a major lie, and all trust that was built was destroyed. Dan was a very smart man, successful entrepreneur, very caring, very sharp, hardworking, and he knew that he had a lot of work to do to change. And he was really committed to being the man that he knew he was and wanted to become. And at the end of the day, he didn't want to lose her. But whenever I asked him a direct question, he would talk, but he wouldn't give me a straight answer. He wasn't listening to understand. He was listening to justify and protect himself. And this was his lifelong survival strategy since he was a little boy. He had learned how to stay intellectually in control instead of emotionally honest. And I could tell that he wasn't listening to me. So finally, I interrupted the conversation and I said to him, listen, I want to help you, but I can't pour into a full cup. And right now, you are a full cup filled with all the things that you know. And what I'm trying to point to are all the things that you don't know and that you don't know that you don't know. You've developed a survival defense mechanism where you talk your way around accountability, you deflect, you avoid vulnerability, and try to control how people see you. And this is why she can't trust you. And suddenly, something shifted within him. He got quiet, emotional, teary eyed. I could see that defensive wall drop. And then he looked at me and he said, Janelle, you're 100% right. I'm all in. Show me the way because I know I really need help and I can't lose her. And from that moment, his transformation began because he finally stopped protecting himself long enough to learn something new and admit that he didn't know everything. And this is what so many people don't understand about change. Transformation doesn't happen when you finally find the answer. It happens when you're willing to let go of the old identities, behaviors, and beliefs that just no longer serve you. And that's uncomfortable, right? Because so many people don't know who they are outside of the version of themselves that they've spent decades surviving and becoming. And honestly, this is why so many men wait until the relationship is already falling apart before seeking help and support. Because asking for help, admitting that you don't know everything, takes vulnerability and honesty. It's very humbling and uncomfortable. Our ego convinces us that we should know this by now. And then if we don't know, that somehow we're weak or stupid or some story like that, which simply isn't true. And for a lot of highly intelligent people, that feels really terrifying because they've built their entire identity around being competent, capable, and having all the answers. And in a strange way, sometimes failing feels safer than admitting that you don't know the answers and that you need support. So people avoid it and they stay stuck. They repeat the same patterns until eventually they realize how much it's negatively impacting them. Or they do nothing and everything they love slips away. But let's look at this differently for a moment. The best performers and athletes in the world all have coaches. And clearly, it's not because they're weak or they're failing, but because they understand something that most people don't. You cannot see your own blind spots clearly from inside the game. And the best athletes in the world understand there is always another level to improve and another level of growth that's available to them. And if they want to perform at their highest level, if they want to make what's difficult easy, that it takes work and constant leveling up. They surround themselves with people who challenge them, support them, sharpen them, and help them become their best, reach their potential. And relationships, which are way more complex than sports, are no different. So if you know that you're smart and you keep making relationship mistakes, here's what I want to say. It doesn't mean that you're stupid. It doesn't mean that you're broken. And it doesn't mean that you're incapable of love or having a healthy relationship. Most of us were never taught or shown what a happy, healthy relationship looks like. We were taught to achieve, to perform, to survive, but not how to connect emotionally. And that's why so many smart people stay stuck longer than they have to. It's because intelligence can sometimes make it harder to admit that there may be something they're not seeing. You must first seek to understand before you can be understood. So here's a few questions I'd love for you to sit with. Where in your relationships are you always trying to be right and win the argument instead of trying to understand someone else's point of view? And what might become possible if you got curious about the ways that your intelligence may be keeping you and preventing you from being fully honest, deeply connected, or letting down those defensive walls that you spent years building? Because you cannot learn anything new while you're defending what you already think you know. And just like I told Dan, you can't pour into a full cup. You need to be able to make space, which means that you have to be willing to get rid of some of what's already there. And that takes humility and courage and commitment. Because the moment that you stop defending the version of you that contributed to the problem and take responsibility for your part without shame or guilt, is the moment everything starts to shift. And sometimes the greatest breakthrough in your life starts with these four words. Maybe I don't know.